Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's been an excellent hearing, very good witnesses. And let me start by saying I think the principal question for our panel and for our challenge in the days ahead is how our country is going to respond to what has been described as some experts as China's green mercantilism. And there is a new paper out this morning, Mr. Chairman. I would just ask unanimous consent to put it into the record. They, in the paper, define green mercantilism as essentially policies that give other countries an unfair advantage in terms of our interests, allow them to boost their exports, limit imports of clean energy technologies. And Mr. Wolf, for me, you really summed it up when you said in your testimony, you asked essentially, is it acceptable for Chinese industrial policy to shape the U.S. economy? And I think that that sort of incorporates the essence of this issue with respect to green mercantilism. And it also goes beyond the trade issue, which I think is important for us. I also chair the Finance Subcommittee on International Trade. I'm interested in expanding trade. I don't think free trade means trade free from rules. And what is appealing to me about the way you asked it, it gives us a chance to shape the challenge, both in terms of trade and other kinds of issues. So why don't we start with the other four witnesses responding to Mr. Wolf's question. His question was, is it acceptable for China's industrial policy to shape the U.S. economy? Give me your response to his question, and if you think it is unacceptable for China to be shaping our policy, what do you think we ought to do in a proactive way to combat it? Let's start with you, Mr. Wu.
Thank you for the question. No, I don't think it's acceptable. I think the point that also Senator Murkowski brought up earlier is whether or not we should emulate China. I think the answer to that is also no. The fact of the matter is, the economies of the United States and China are different, and the reality is also that China has a vast amount of energy demand that's still growing, and they have a very high reliance on coal at the moment, and that's a very different situation to what we have here in the United States. And I think I agree with what Dr. Scissors mentioned earlier about sort of the question about gas, which is, yeah, I think China is looking a little bit with envy over to the United States regarding our ability to exploit shale gas, which China does have vast reserves of, but currently lacks the technology to exploit it on the level that we have done here in the United States. So I think the answer is no. I mean, I think we have to take a very different look at the way the economies of the United States and China are. And finally, I would just like to add that, with regards to metrics, yes, I think China has done very well in what it's done very well, which is manufacturing. China makes a lot of things, not just clean energy goods. So it has exploited its advantage, which is to manufacture solar PV and also wind turbines on a very large scale. And has done so in a very cost-effective manner, which we can argue whether it's good or bad for who and for whom. But also one perhaps benefit of that is that it's been able to reduce the cost of renewable energy significantly, at least for China, for its domestic consumption.
Mr. Prestowitz, I know that you don't think it's acceptable for China's industrial policy to shape the U.S. economy. What do you think our country should do in a proactive way to combat it?
Well, I think, and we have to use our heads. I don't think that it's acceptable for China to shape our economy, but at the same time, I don't think that we need willy-nilly to imitate everything that China does. I mean, as Derek points out, everything China does is not necessarily right. So I think what's required is for us to spend some time thinking hard about what is it that's really important to us, and then take the measures that are necessary to counter the negative impact on us achieving our goals of some of these mercantilist policies. So, for example, we know that an element, an aspect of the mercantilist policies tends to be excess investment in the promoting country, followed by dumping. Typically in the U.S., we wait for an affected company or entity to file an anti-dumping complaint before we do anything about dumping. We don't have to. The Secretary of Commerce has the authority to self-initiate anti-dumping cases. So one thing that I've advocated is let's monitor industries where other countries have active, proactive industrial policies, look at the extent of their overinvestment and their their dumping activity, and self-initiate cases. Take them to the WTO right away, preempt it. That's one element. Typically, such countries have currency manipulation policies. Typically, they're not just China, Singapore, Taiwan, Korea. They intervene in currency markets every day to keep their currencies undervalued. Take measures to counter that. Impose capital controls if necessary. Tim Geithner can do it, doesn't even have to ask the Congress for permission. Set up consortia, a la Sematech or PVTech or whatever it is. I think that a big factor in the United States is investment taxes. I think that very often the incentives for investment in the United States are not nearly as attractive as they are for investment abroad. Singapore is the world champion at attracting foreign investment. We could learn well to copy a lot of what Singapore does. And so it's a matter of, what's important to us. All right, then what's our strategy and a combination of carrots and sticks to get what's important for us. The one point, and just to emphasize what Alan said, is this. Typically, I know Alan and I have been involved in some of these discussions for a long time. Typically, you get into these debates in the administration, whoever's administration, and the argument is we don't pick winners and losers. And, we shouldn't be intervening to subsidize or provide corporate benefits. And what's lost in that discussion is that in a situation in which you're facing an active industrial policy abroad, a decision not to intervene is a decision. A decision not to pick winners and losers is a decision to pick a loser. You're not going to be in that industry. That, I think, doesn't get understood typically.
I know my time is up. If we could just, Mr. Holliday and Dr. Scissors, again, responding to a question Mr. Wolf said.
No, sir, I don't think it should dictate our international policy, but we do need to be focused. We need to have vision. We need to understand where our country's going and where the global technologies and market are going so that we can be strong and successful. And to build on the not picking winners and losers, the consortium model is perfect for that. You pick the technologies, you have a collaborative model where you don't just spread the dollars around. You better leverage our universities and our national labs to really impact the industry, and it's critical that we do that.
Dr. Scissors.
I have one objection to the green mercantilism designation. The word green is unnecessary. They're mercantilist and they're big, which means we cannot avoid Chinese industrial policy affecting the U.S. economy. We don't like it, but it's true. To me, the best response is to get them to do less of it. We're not going to get them to stop, and that should include threatening them. There are things China doesn't want to give up, and we need to push them to try to get their industrial policy to back off in certain areas. And where that isn't going to work, sometimes their subsidies help us. They make things cheaper here for American consumers. Sometimes they hurt in ways we can't respond to. So I think my colleagues on the panel have all said a variation of the same thing. We need to identify not everywhere they affect us, no avoiding it, but where we don't like them affecting us and where we can respond properly. And that's a subset. So we need to focus down and say, all right, here's the big group of things. Where can we do something that's useful that really matters?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.